Hello beloveds, and welcome to today's video. I'm here to talk about all the books that I read during September. Now bear in mind I've got maybe a couple of days, maybe 2 or 3 days until the end of the month, so I may be able to squeeze one more book, which is, I'm thinking, possibly, if any, going to be Echo. Can't remember the author's name off the top of my head, but it's one of the Book Sirens arcs that I've been reading, and it's like a little novella, so if anything it may be that I finish. But other than that, I have read a total of, I do believe, 12 books during September. So shall we get started? Got my trusty book journal here, so let's remind myself where it all began. The first book I read during September was The Never King by Nikki St. Crow. This is a dark fantasy romance retelling of Peter Pan and Neverland, and it's definitely smart. All characters are aged up, just want to pop that up there, and it's an imagined world, basically taking the themes of Neverland and the characters, but it's a whole new world basically, and it's not the Neverland that you grew up with. Trust. So a little bit more about this. The Darling women have always been kidnapped on their 18th birthday and taken to Neverland, and when they've returned back to our time in Earth, they are changed, and not necessarily for the better. Pan is on a mission looking for something he believes the Darling women with their first ancestor stole back in the day, and he's honestly not afraid of breaking a few minds to get it back. This was such a gritty, fast-paced story with a great blend of smut to plot ratio. I felt like there was enough going on to carry the story, and then it would switch to a steamy scene, and it balanced each other out really nicely. Everyone was awful, no character was likeable, and the things they got up to with each other was deplorable, honestly. They knew it, and they acknowledged that, and they carried on with it, and I kind of loved them for that. It was definitely a crazy over-the-top storyline in terms of the content that was included, but I honestly had such a great time reading this. I ended up giving this a 5 out of 5 stars in total, and yeah, I'd recommend it. I would like to read the rest of the series. I originally thought it was a duology off the top of my head, and then when I marked this as finished, I looked at the rest of the books, and I think there's at least 4 books. So yeah, if they're all around the same sort of page count as this one, which it wasn't much over 100 pages, if that, then hopefully I can get through them and fly through them. I was borrowing this at the library, so maybe they've got the best in. Okay, I think the next book I read after that one was The Doll Funeral. I have this in a random slip because I was using these last month and the months prior, but then I decided to kind of be a little bit more creative and make my own ones again. So this is just tucked in my book, but I want to say it was The Doll Funeral. This one I listened to via the Borrow Box library app, and this is by Kate Hammer. It's a thriller kind of ghost story, and I gave this one a 2.5 out of 5 stars. So we're following Ruby, a young girl who's living with her abusive adopted family. She finally gets in her mind to set out to search for her biological parents, particularly her biological mum. And that's kind of where the story develops, but you can tell from early on, it's not shied away from that. Ruby has some strange sixth sense, I guess. There's something that she's definitely in tuned with in terms of the other world and ghosts and spirits, but it's never really spoken about in so short terms until like the very last minute, I would say. So with this story, I was in kind of 2 minds about it. I was really ready to just DNF it quite early on, at many instances really, due to the lack of connection that I felt to the plot and the characters, but I also wanted to see it through due to the buzzwords that was used that definitely call to me as this type of reader, right? As well as the story was unfolding, the more haunting aspect, which I wasn't expecting from just reading the blurb. So I was a little bit like wishy-washy from the start really, with should I carry on, should I DNF, what do I do? It's calling to me, but at the same time I'm lacking connection and like overall care for the story. But I do think that the author kind of tried to weave too many themes into one story. None of them felt like really solid enough or truly fully formed to hold up on their own, so everything kind of felt a little bit shortchanged in that regard. I also think I personally missed some crucial moments where particular plot connections and pertaining to like the more supernatural side of the story were revealed, so I was lost for most of it than I really should have. I think maybe because I was listening to it and I was in two minds about DNFing or not, I wasn't always super focused. So probably during one of those instances when something was cleared up, I completely missed it because I was away with the fairies whilst I was listening to that part, if that makes sense. So I probably did that a disservice in my own reading experience, and that's on me. I mean, I wouldn't be object to rereading this and maybe trying the physical version, because even now I am like, every now and then I have a ghost of it in the back of my mind where I'm thinking about the story and I thought, oh, that's quite interesting. I wonder how those themes actually connected. And I do have some interests in just learning a little bit more about the spirits and hoping that if I focused properly and read it like with my eyes this time round, I might have connected the dots a little bit more or learned a little bit more of like the lore of this ability that she had, and maybe got a little bit better depth and appreciation of the story. But I don't know if I'll ever get around to doing that, so we'll see. If you read this book and you've had a different experience, do let me know. Okay, after that I finally finished up a long-standing arc that I've been reading for months. I think I went in this thinking it was going to be a really quick kind of monster romance horror, like dark book with pacey nice smart that I was after, and the page count threw me off. I should have done better research because I didn't realize it was going to be over 500 pages. I don't know if that was just because of me reading it predominantly on my phone, so you know, less text on a page, right? But it was just generally more pages than I was expecting, and I think it took me longer to get into, and other things that I'm about to get into. This is The Murder of Secret and Lies by Deja Colleen, and it's a dark romance kind of mystery. So this is, I felt kind of like an adult Monster High, just in terms of like the characters that we've got, the school setting, like university setting. And basically 40 years ago, monsters were kind of outed to the greater human population of the world, right? But to keep the Isle safe, where most of the monsters inhabit, like safely at least, Monster Island, the TV reality show, was aired, and it started to basically introduce the human counterparts to their way of living and kind of try and destigmatize any fear that they had, as well as give them the opportunity in later years as humans to come onto the show and visit the island as well. So it's a contest. The idea is, you know, to make a bit of money, keep the island safe, make people see that monsters, I guess, aren't scary, and also there's an opportunity to, if you win it, you get an education, because you have to be enrolled in the university no matter your educational background or your age or anything like that. You have to be enrolled in the university. That's part of the rules and regulations of being on the show, and if you win or last throughout the whole of it, you get to stay on the island if you want. And a lot of people are doing this in this particular season with the characters we're following because they are running from something, or they have been sent on there to infiltrate something. So a lot of people have some dark secrets, some seedy backgrounds, and a lot of baggage that they're carrying that they may not necessarily agree with, or that they kind of want out of, and don't know how to go about it. So this had some really intriguing characters and plots with a very Moorish atmosphere, but it was way too slow burn for me. I didn't expect it to be so world buildery, and I get why. Like, it's a whole new world, right? And there's a lot of like hierarchy with different like monster castes and species, I guess. But for the type of story that I was expecting going in, which was mainly dark romance, I think this sounds so weird because a lot of people say, when I go into smut, there's no story and I want story, but I almost feel like there was too much story. That sounds so bad. Like, a lot of focus was on all the small details that were kind of touched on once and didn't really go back to, so it was almost like it could have done with a little bit more editing, right? Fill me with more yearning than any action that we got, and I think I just wanted some good hot heavy action, to be honest. And we were kind of getting teased a lot with some characters, and then some things didn't even happen until, I want to say, at least 60%. Like, there was a proper more intense sexual scene at least, but I think because I'd gone into it with different expectations, I thought it was going to be more, almost more dark and more romancy. That sounds so like dickish. I don't mean it in a nasty way, but I thought it was going to be more dark, more romance, and less lore, shall we say. There were some fab characters, as I say, but I think it just could have been edited a little bit better, a little bit more with a finer tooth comb, because there was a lot of information in this that maybe wasn't necessarily important from a reader's perspective to the story, you know. Enjoyed it. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It just took me way longer than I was expecting, and I think it was a very different story to what I went in anticipating. The next book I read was another one that I borrowed out of the library, and this is Jelly Bean by Eve Ainsworth, and it's a recent book, I do believe. It's just come out. This is following Ellie, who battles with feelings of anxiety about school that she just can't really explain, not only to herself, it's just like a pit of emotion in herself, but she also can't explain it to the adults in her life that are trying to help her. So I ended up giving this a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and initially I picked it up because I instantly recognised the art style, being Theo Parrish, who did Homebody that I read, I want to say during the summer, maybe July, and I love the art style of Theo Parrish, so I picked it up being intrigued by it, and it was only a small book anyway, but I came out the other end with more understanding and empathy towards emotionally based school avoidance, which is a condition really that I didn't know an awful lot about. Yeah, this gave me some better understanding about it really, and I thought it was a quite important story for both adults and kids to read. Okay, next up I read one of Tor's independent short fiction, and this is through the Reactor magazine page, and this is called Redemption Song by Quan Barry. It's a sci-fi and it's a retelling of the Greek myth of Pandora, and I ended up giving this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was quite moving for just a small page count. I think it had like 21 pages in total. It was emotive, it was thought-provoking, and it was very intriguing. It had me thinking about it long after I finished reading. The ending itself left me stunned, and I think for it to spin such a good like plot twist and like reveal again for such a small page count was really impressive. Some great themes, for example, the one being the main for me that stuck out and that was really well delivered was civilization destroying the earth piece by piece, and the lengths will go as a species to hide the truth, regardless of what that is, right, to fit whoever's in power's needs. I thought it was really interesting. After that, I finished up a play. I read Macbeth by Shakespeare, and I listened and read this physically, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. This one is about 3 witches who prophesize that Macbeth will become a king, will do anything in that power to pursue that outcome. Whether that means murder, so be it. So almost everyone in this story is power hungry, superficial, devious, leading to very political plays at hand, deceptive characters, deceptive storytellings. No one can be trusted. It all mounts up to this satisfying betrayal plot that all comes crumbling down really towards Macbeth and Lady Macbeth's own paranoia over what they've done, their own guilt, and it drives them to the point of insanity, which is such a thrilling just outcome really when you read how much they've done in to seek this power that's been prophesized, right? You've got this blend of arrogance and paranoia that just has an explosive end for both of them, and it is a really satisfying story. Very interesting. I'm sure a lot of things went over my head that had I studied it like properly at school, like for an exam or something, probably would have sunk in a little bit more in this time of reading. But I enjoyed it for what I could at face value, surface level, the themes I could understand. I enjoyed. Okie dokie. I finally got my teeth sunk into The Children of the Night by M.A. Bennett. This is a YA fantasy horror. This is the sequel to Young Gothic, which I read last summer, I want to say, and absolutely raved about it. I'm pretty sure I've got a dedicated book review for that book on the channel if you want to give that a go. But this one was fantastic. We're following 4 characters, Hal, Eve, Griffin and Wren, and not to spoil all that happens in the first book, but basically they've been invited to go to Transylvania and spend St. Andrew's night in the hopes to find out more about what they all are. And within the first book, the Young Gothic, I guess, association is this kind of scheme that they were invited to join in the hopes of imbuing some new life into the arts, whether that's some gothic fiction, whether it's a play, a movie, music, that sort of thing. And so they applied to this scheme for the summer and were selected as the talented few to have I think a couple of months respite away from the main civilization, just to let the creative juices flow and kind of really enjoy that dark, macabre setting. They find out a lot of things about themselves, each other, and the true nature of this foundation, the Diodati Foundation, that have set up the Young Gothic scheme. And it's not what they were expecting at all. It's very supernatural, very fantasy based, horror based, and it's a lot of fun. Really enjoy it, really recommend this series. This one, I had given it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I loved the backdrop was against Transylvania in the run up to St. Andrew's Night, which set a fantastic gothic atmosphere for the story. I think I'm gonna do a full video review for this one particular as well. I have the sampler here, but I read the full version via the library, so I've since returned that. But yeah, I think I'm gonna do a full review because I just really enjoy these stories, and hopefully we have another one maybe next year. I don't know, this only just came out this year, so fingers crossed. I really enjoyed it, definitely recommend it. I think after that I read the first volume of Drrr. I don't know if I'm still pronouncing that wrong. This is volume 1 by Aku Satogori, and it is kind of a random, I don't know if it fall under slice of life. It's kind of a weird one, but I guess generally speaking it's slice of life. It's set in Ikebukuro, where Tokyo's wildest characters gather, and odd things seem to happen every day. Unfortunately, I gave this one a 2 out of 5 stars. It was such a chaotic onslaught of confusion for me. Too many POVs to keep track of, and they just seem to switch in and out of perspective without much announcement or clarity for me. I think out of all of it, the plot point that I was more interested in was the headless biker and that story there. Anything to do with folklore, you know, legend, I feel like, oh, I'm instantly intrigued, and that was kind of the saving grace for me, at least in this volume. So I was definitely interested in continuing on, and I have read volume 2, which I'll talk about in just a moment. Righty, I finished an e-arc. I think this one was through Book Sirens, and it's Hellraiser Death of the Party by Thomas Kingsley Troop, who's written loads of children's books in the past, I do believe, so I think an established author. This is a middle grade ghost story, and the brief blurb I have here is: after moving home and school, Sissy stumbles on a family heirloom that gives her the ability to see ghosts. So I ended up giving this one a 3 out of 5 stars. It was a fun little spooky story, perfect for the time of year that we're in now. I like how Sissy stands up for herself and kind of goes out of her way to just be herself, regardless of whether she's going to get teased at her new school or not. She does eventually find a little group of friends that just get her and don't really care about her weird ways. Nice that she could just be unapologetically her and not really care about that. I think I would have loved more information on the more supernatural side of things. So this heirloom that allows her to see ghosts, I would have loved to know more about that. I think there's a sequel in the works. I don't know if I'm necessarily super eager to pick that up, but I imagine that they'd probably go into more depth about this heirloom in that book, if that's kind of the direction of the plot. But I also think that more time with the gran who kind of gave her this heirloom would have been really nice as well. The gran has dementia, and she's kind of in and out of lucidity, and at times when the heirloom is mentioned, you can see that there's a bit of hesitation in the conversation there for perhaps fear. So it would have been interesting to see if they had some more sit-down talks together, what kind of became of that. But I don't know, again, that might be something that would grow a little bit more in a future book potentially. But yes, this was a 3 out of 5 stars. Okie dokie, I think I've got 3 more books to talk about and then we will wrap this up. So I listened to Later by Stephen King. Didn't get to finish this for my little Stephen King summer challenge, unfortunately, so I only really read 2 books for that summer challenge, and then I read this one in September. And this is kind of like horror. It's a shorter fiction, and I ended up giving this one a 3 out of 5 stars. We are following Jamie, who wants an ordinary childhood, but unfortunately for him, he gets nothing like that because he sees ghosts. another ghost story. Why not? I feel like I've got very much themed things in here. I feel like I've got some vampire stuff, I've got some just monster madness, and I've also got ghosts. I enjoyed this a lot more than I expected. I think there was a lot of telling over showing, though. I will say that I like to be invested in a story and actually see like the fruits of labor, if you know what I mean. I like to see as it's unfolding, but because of the way the story was told, it was kind of like a future Jamie, like an older Jamie reflecting on his life growing up and telling us a story, almost like a diary. It made sense that it was told that way. I just prefer to be like actually shown and live it as it's happening, if that makes sense, like actually as it's happening. So I feel like that kind of took away some of the fear factor for me, but at the same time, with the narrator that we had, oh my gosh, the narration was fantastic. It really did get scary because there was an entity that was kind of like the main villain arc, I would say, for the whole duration of the story, and the voice that this narrator put on for this entity was so unsettling. It was so chilling, and there were times where listening to this at night time on my own, I had to stop, look around, turn on a nightlight because it got into my bones. It was so uncomfortable, and there was background music as well, like just slight, but it was just unsettling atmospheric music, right? So I think that helped to alleviate some of the lack of fear I was getting from the writing style. Having the narrator reading it to me the way that he did kind of made up for that. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, the performance there just added to the fear. The last twist, though, if you guys have read this, I'm not going to get into it, but it was so gross and so unnecessary, and I don't know why that was put in. I could have been so happy with the ending as we had it, and then King pulled that out, and I was just like, but why? What does that give to the story? We're at the end now, like, you didn't need to do that. So yeah, that kind of ruined it a little bit for me. It kind of left it with a sour taste, you know? Anyway, last two books. I've got A Cruel Thirst here. This is by Angela Montoya, and I listened and read this. This is a YA historical fantasy, and I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. We are following our two main protagonists. We've got Vampire Lalo and Hunter Carolina, who must band together to take down a common enemy, but can they stop the killing of each other long enough to do so? This had definitely a slow start to begin with, but it quickened in pace, and when it did, I enjoyed so much more of the story. I felt like the chemistry that we had between the characters was instantaneous. Insta love, which I'm not really into, but in terms of the story, there was reason for that. So we had enemies to lovers, we had fake dating and marriage of convenience, and those are tropes that were executed really well, I think, in the story. And it's funny to say, really, because most of those I don't usually enjoy, and as I say, the insta love kind of goes hand in hand with some of those tropes, but it was reasonable because it made sense for the direction of the story, right? I just loved how opposite the characters were, but the balance was perfect between them, and just seeing the connection grow and I don't know, them really catching feelings for each other was so sweet. But the actual vampire background was awesome. I really loved the time period that we were in, and the culture setting as well was so cool. We had these two side characters called Nena and Fernanda. Nena is Carolina's cousin and Fernanda is Lalo's sister, and I just loved the banter that everyone had together. I also really enjoyed the normative queer rep. That was so nice to see, especially in this time period. It just wasn't like frowned upon or looked upon as weird. It was literally normative, and I loved that. So yeah, I do recommend this. It wasn't maybe as addictive a read as some other books have been for me, but I'm glad that I finally read it and I enjoyed it, and I'd recommend it. Okay, the last book that I read during September was Drrr Volume 2. Again, this is like adventure slice of life manga, I guess. It's kind of strange. I don't know what's going on. It's a bit crazy. But I did enjoy this a little bit more than the first volume. So I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. We end up meeting some characters that are a little bit notorious in the world, and characters that our protagonist, Mikado, has been warned to completely avoid at all costs, and of course he just bumps into them in the street, right? So yeah, I think I enjoyed this a little bit more because we're following Kelty's character, mostly in I'd say the first half really. The first few chapters are about Kelty and the law there, and that is the headless biker that I said that I liked in the first volume. So learning a little bit more about what kind of being they are is really cool. I also really like the fact that whole plot is Kelty has lost their head, right? It's a headless biker that, you know, is known for not having a head, obviously, but they usually have their heads under their arm. No, this character has been searching for the head for the last 20 years and cannot find it, knows it's somewhere in Japan because they've followed this like feeling, this like thread, like invisible thread, but they're stuck at a road at the minute. They're stuck at a fork in the road and they just can't seem to find it. There is a weird dynamic with the Yaguri siblings that I just don't like. Don't know why it's in here. Hope it doesn't progress much further than where we're at the minute. But yeah, other than that, I think I will continue with this series, but I only had the first 2 volumes, and because I didn't have like a massive success, overarching excitement reading this, I'm not going to go and get any more. I'll probably just switch to the anime. I had a little look briefly on Crunchyroll and I couldn't see it on there, so I have to have a look properly again. But if you know where they're streaming Drrr, I'm just going to call it Drrr now, I think, because that's easier to say than Drrr, because I feel like I'm not saying it properly. Then do let me know, because I feel like it would be a better experience watching. And this is like a mixed media project. I didn't know that. It actually started as an anime, and then I think they made light novels, and then they adapted it into a manga, and it's like a 3-way mixed media project, which is quite cool. But I think I might have better luck watching it. I think it might be with the hectic chaos of it all. I think it might translate better, like as a viewing experience. Do you know what I mean? Just to follow it in the manga form is not really doing it for me. But yes, that is it for today's video. Those are the 12, I think, if I've counted correctly, books that I've read during September. Thank you so much for watching. If you've read any of these books, do let me know what you thought about them. If you've read anything you'd like to recommend to me, again, let me know. I would love to hear it. But for now, thank you for watching once again, and I shall catch you in another video soon. Bye.